So we are on to our last piece of the money button mechanics, which is the perfect world and the golden tip. Which, now that I think about it, that sounds a little funny, but yeah, the point of the perfect world and the golden tip is to help your prospect imagine what the world is going to be like after they have purchased your product or offer. What goes down must come up, and when we've, as you'll see when we get later on, we want to talk about horror stories, nightmare stories, and you know, how to really connect with your prospect in a deep, dark place. And the way that you do that is through your avatar work, by understanding what are the awful things that your avatar has to go through. So we've done some of that already. But to flip it around, we need a golden tip, something, a perfect world, something that is the amazing place where your prospect's going to live after they have taken your advice. So the perfect world is everything your prospect wants and more. It's such a perfect world that it's like, it's even better than they had imagined. And the golden tip is advice from your product, which demonstrates that it works. It builds authority. So we've talked a little bit about this already, but we will go into it a little more depth here. So the perfect world, here are the three elements of a great perfect world. One, it's factual. So what will actually happen to your prospect? What are the facts of his or her life after they purchase this? It's emotional. How will your prospect feel? What will their feelings be after they've been through this? And it's consequential. So what will this mean for your prospect's life? Not just the feelings they'll have, but what second and third order consequences will result from them having made this decision today. So just to repeat those, I really want to make sure we're clear on this. The right perfect world is factual. It reveals facts about the perfect world that they will experience. It's emotional, so it tells them how they're going to feel, and it's consequential because it has second and third order consequences and spillover effects into other areas of the prospect's life. So how do you create a perfect world? It's sort of through a brainstorming session. You could certainly channel the spirits in this one, and you could ask yourself, what are the absolute best outcomes that could arise from using your product? So, you know, somebody gets it, they put it to use, and it just works even beyond your wildest hopes. You're like, oh my God, that actually happened to that person. Start there. Start as far out as you can go. You can always come back, but start as far as you can go. And another question you could ask along these lines to really go that far is, what's a happy accident that could arise from the product working too well? You know, in the girlfriend system, to give you some example, we talk about, you know, I used this text-by-text system on a girl who had a boyfriend. You know, she was making out with me in the car the next time I saw her, and then she got a little clingy. You know, I really didn't expect to take things that far. I just thought I'd see if, you know, she would have any interest in me, but I had to let her go because, you know, she was getting too clingy. So that's sort of that happy accident that happens as a result of somebody, you know, purchasing the product and it working too well. So that's, you know, again, point one is, what are the absolute best outcomes that could arise? Another way, another lens to approach the perfect world with is, what are the prospect's selfish reptile brain's thoughts in this perfect world? So, you know, in other words, what smug sense of satisfaction will your prospect get from triumphing over their weakness? This is really one of those, you know, feeling questions. And we want to dive into their selfish reptile brain, right? What are the things that their reptile brain really wants and wouldn't admit? You know, in our case, it might be, you know, multiple women showing up at your house, knocking down your door and giving you sexual favor after sexual favor. That is definitely a reptile brain thought. That's not a higher order thing. That's entirely selfish. And, you know, we felt like going there because we know that is going to make people take action. On the other hand, you know, the flip side of this is, what are your prospects' aspirational higher order thoughts in this perfect world? You know, the first part was, what smug sense of satisfaction will your prospect get from triumphing over their weaknesses? This question, we're trying to balance that out from, how does your prospect justify their smugness? What makes them think I'm better because of this? So with the girlfriend system, the way that we help them justify that is, you'll be a better boyfriend. You'll be more committed to the woman who you ultimately choose. You'll love waking up next to her. You'll go out of your way for her because she's, the most special woman in your life. So that kind of helps him justify and offset the smugness and the selfishness that we're also promising him in this perfect world. Two other questions about how to create a perfect world. What will no longer happen to your prospect? So what are the things that they'll never have to deal with again? In girlfriend, they'll never have to worry about approaching a woman again because they'll know how to get them to approach her. In lust, they'll never feel the sting of being rejected by their wife or girlfriend, or being barked at or being talked down on, because their wife or girlfriend will develop a new level of respect for them. So these are things that will no longer happen to your prospect. And the other key portion of that is, what will your prospect no longer feel? So, the way that we might say this for girlfriend is, you'll no longer feel the sullen loneliness of standing at a bar nursing your drink while you look at all these women passing you by. That's much more powerful than, you'll never, not meet a woman again. You'll never feel that sullen loneliness of standing at a bar nursing your drink. Pulling this out of the feelings that your prospect will no longer have. If I was thinking about how to sell the backpacks for Tortuga, it'd probably be something along the lines of, you'll never feel the embarrassment of having to drag your wheeled bag up cobblestone steps, as you walk through an old European city. All the onlookers wondering, who is this tourist amongst us? We've all had that experience, and that's a kind of emotional way of, you won't have this embarrassment anymore. Maybe I should send this to the Tortuga people. Just thinking about that. So that's how you create the perfect world. Let's just repeat that again. What are the absolute best outcomes that could arise from using your product? What are the prospect's selfish reptile brain thoughts in this perfect world? What are the prospect's aspirational higher order thoughts and experiences in this perfect world? What will your prospect what will no longer happen to your prospect, and what will your prospect no longer feel? So that is how you create the perfect world. The golden tip we've talked about a little bit already. The golden tip is a juicy, compelling tip that your prospect can see themselves using. So this is really going to be effective for info marketing products, for anything where you're selling, financial gain, or emotional gain, or relationship gain, or anything like that. It is something that's going to demonstrate authority, and ideally it has to demonstrate the big idea, but it has to be subordinate to the big idea. So let me explain this one. A few years ago, I wrote a video sales letter for a product called Fearless. And the big idea is that there's 6 simple things that you have to get right with a woman. And if you get all these things right, she'll know that you're, one of the top 10% of guys. And if you don't get them right, then she'll instantly write you off and put you in the friend zone. It was clunky. It was one of the first sort of offers that I put together after starting to understand these concepts, and it was before I understood everything that I'm sharing with you today. So what did I do? I started off the VSL saying, hey, it's Christian, and I'm here to tell you how to, make any woman want you, whatever the claims are up front. There's only 6 things that you have to get right, and I'll tell you all 6 in a second. And then, there's my open loop. And then I went on to do some common enemies, some rapport building, tell a little story. And then I delivered all 6 things. And I told them all 6, and then I, went on. And we watched on the analytics for the video, and viewership just plummeted after they heard the 6th thing. They were not interested in following along after that. And there's 2 reasons for that. I think one of them is that the concept itself and the 6 things that I was sharing, they were not huge ahas. What was the big aha was how they were taught in the product, but we didn't demonstrate that well in the VSL. Secondly, they were the big idea. So I gave away the whole big idea as the tip as the golden tip in this VSL. And once you've given that away, you've got nothing else exciting to give. So the real thing that we want people to experience is that positive expectancy, that notion of I can see this working for myself in my life. Not necessarily going out and doing it, but I can see this working. We've talked about the tip from the girlfriend system, where we talk about the 4 steps that we would give a guy to know if a woman wants to hook up. And we also talked about the launch of push button dating. Just to repeat that one, we did a 3-part email sequence. The first part was announcing it. The second few parts were getting guys' profiles set up and getting them messaging women. And the third part was, how to get them out on a date and take it from there. And nobody actually went through and set up their profiles because they were just fucking lazy. So that was not positive expectancy. That was almost giving too much of a golden tip. That was actually giving work to do, and I guess people just decided they didn't want to do the work. So the golden tip, again, it should be a big, juicy, compelling idea, a tip that your prospect can see themselves using. It has to demonstrate the big idea, but still be subordinate to the big idea. So if I was doing this for, again, a backpack company, I might say, give some packing tips. Here's how to get here's how to get a month's worth of gear into a bag that you can fit into your carry-on. That would be a huge golden tip. Just a little example there. So how do you create a golden tip? Well, the first one is, what are the best tips that you have for your prospect? I'm assuming that if you're selling something, certainly something that's going to create change in your prospect's life, you have some good tips. So start there. What are the best tips that you've got? And then which of those tips, to narrow it down a little further, which of those tips create a compelling visual of a future reality? So if you look at the one that I use for girlfriend, a guy can see a woman showing up at his door, he can see her coming in, he can see himself handing her a glass of wine, and then ideally making out with her on the couch and taking it from there. So which of your tips create this promising, compelling vision of a future reality? You want to weed out anything that's a little too complicated, or where you're not creating that really compelling visual in your mind, in your prospect's mind. And then here's the next key piece. What is the biggest promise that you can make about that tip? Because this is something that you'll probably use earlier on in the sales letter to get them to keep watching that tip. So what's a big promise you can make about an outcome that your prospect will receive or experience when they hear this tip? And then here's the next part. How can you explain that in the context of the big idea? So how does this tip fit into the big idea? Is it part of her obsession story? Is it part of psychological conditioning? Is it part of traveling around the world with nothing but a carry-on bag? How does this tip fit into the big idea and drive home and reinforce that big idea? And then how can you explain it as clearly as possible? This is one of these areas where, you've been listening to me talk for a long time, and in this format, we have the luxury of me being able to ramble a bit, pontificate a bit, and go into extemporaneous detail around these things so that you can get more context and hopefully have a richer learning experience. With that said, that is not how you sell. Selling is not about learning, it's about selling. So when you are teaching, you have to explain as clearly as possible. So those are the ways that you create the golden tip. Let's just go through them again. What are the best tips you have for your prospect? Which of those tips create a compelling visual about a future reality? What is the biggest promise that you can make about those tips so that you can promise it earlier on in your offer? How can you explain the tip in the context, the tip that you choose in the context of the big idea? And how can you explain it as clearly as possible? So that is the perfect world and the golden tip. How do you know when you've got a great perfect world? The first thing is, you're sitting around with your friends, you're like, geez Louise, that sounds amazing. I want that. I would love it if that happened. That sounds just great. That's a good perfect world. Some other nuances. It's emotionally coherent. I've seen people create perfect worlds. I've seen my copywriters do this. They'll create a perfect world which is a little emotionally incoherent. So the narrator is doing things in this perfect world. They're experiencing things in this perfect world that they didn't necessarily want. So that's incoherent. When it's emotionally coherent, the narrator is living and feeling like the opposite of his former self. He doesn't still have old bad beliefs, but he's also not experiencing things outside of that. So the perfect world for the girlfriend system is, I started dating some great women, having long-term relationships, and finally ended up, finding one who I want to stay with for a long time. It's not, I went out, I started banging all sorts of broads and going to bars every night and hooking up like crazy. That would be incoherent factually. And emotionally in this story, I'm telling people how I'm falling in love and I have the experience of falling in love, and that's what I really wanted, and I'm able to look into a woman's eyes and just feel deep passion and love for her. It's not, I woke up every day on fire because there was a new girl in my bed and it made me feel like a man. Maybe that's a good one for a get laid offer, but it wouldn't be emotionally coherent for my girlfriend offer. Along those lines, it's also emotionally balanced. So it's neither too selfish or too selfless. So we talked about this earlier. What are the prospects' selfish reptile brain thoughts in this perfect world? And what are your prospects' aspirational higher order thoughts? Now, depending on the emotional maturity of your buyer, you might want to balance this out one way or another. But ideally, you won't have. It shouldn't be too selfish. That is for damn sure. If you make it too selfish, then you'll lose out on anybody who wants to justify their selfish thoughts to themselves. But if it's too selfless, if it's too higher order, then you can lose out on a lot of people who who don't have the resources and the life that they dream of, and who do selfishly want to improve themselves. And finally, it still feels realistic. So it's Elon Musk. It's not Tony Stark. It's rumored, and perhaps it's a fact. I don't know if it's a fact that Elon Musk was the character on whom Tony Stark from the Iron Man movies was based. This billionaire, sort of playboy-ish dude with a great personality, incredible engineer who lived on the beach and just could create anything he wanted. So Elon Musk, his reality is no doubt on many days probably pretty great. Some days I'm sure he's frustrated by stock prices or who knows what, and who knows what the future holds for Elon. But I think we could all envision ourselves, if we had a little bit more intelligence, if we had some different opportunities, we could still envision ourselves living Elon's life. I don't think too many people can envision themselves living Tony Stark's life, where he walks in his room, everything reacts to him electronically, and he's got an electronic AI who puts him in his suit whenever he wants. So your perfect world should still feel realistic. It is Elon Musk. It is not Tony Stark. It's not complete fantasy, but it's about the most unbelievable thing, or the greatest extension of believability that could happen as a result of purchasing your product. And then how do you know when you've got a great golden tip? When you explain it to friends, they're like, wow, that's a great idea. That's really cool. So that's the first one. And then the second one, and this one, again, depends on the market that you're in. It offends people who pride themselves on doing the hard work. So, if your golden tip illustrates a shortcut or some sort of way to demonstrate the mechanism that's going to make people's lives easier without a lot of hard work, then people who hear it should probably say to themselves, man, you're making it easy for people. Come on, they got to do hard work here. And let's face it, to get better at anything, we have to do hard work. We have to put the hard work in, but we would all like a few shortcuts here and there. And that's a perfect segue to where we are right now. So we have just finished the money button mechanics, and you've got a lot of hard work ahead of you. If you've not been doing it already, there's a lot of work to be done to get all of these pieces together. Understanding your avatar, crafting the big promise and the big idea, figuring out what your mechanism is, common enemy, perfect world, all this stuff. We've covered so much territory up to this point, and we've still got, let's see how much we've got to go. We've still got half of it to go. We've still got a lot to go, that much. So the next section is the structure of a sales letter. We're going to walk through a sales letter and talk through all of the components that you need to be in place in order to move somebody from not taking action to taking action. And then we will have some more stuff after that, how to actually write it. But this next section is going to depend on all the work that you do in this previous section. So if you try to jump into it, you're welcome to watch it. You're welcome to learn from it. You might find it interesting. You might be one of those people who likes to jump ahead and just go through the whole thing before you come back. If you want to, I actually learned that way, so fine. But the next section will not be incredibly useful unless you have done all the work up to this point. And when we meet again, I can promise you that I will have less of a beard and perhaps a little bit more of a tan. as I will be taking a few days of pause between now and recording the next section. Obviously for you, it could be a day, it could be a week, or it could be the next 10 seconds from now. But I will be back in a bit, and I cannot wait to jump into the structure of a sales letter.